Hey folks, how's it going? Why does it look so diagonally? I don't like that. Hmm. Oh well. Temporary fix. That's a lot. No. All right, that's not too bad. Let's get the volume up. Okay, I think there is sound. It might have just been really low. And no, no, not that. I don't want to see myself full screen 4K. Don't do that again. Okay, so nobody's here yet. On Facebook, Mike Bowman is in Indiana until Friday, and then they're off to a cruise somewhere halfway around the world or a quarter of the way around the world or someplace close. I forget. Cheryl's here. That's two of us. All right, now we just wait and see who shows up. Miami, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, St. Martin, and St. Thomas. Nice little jaunt. Well, right now it's just you, me, and Mike and Facebook, I think. 4 sea days. That's a lot of sea days for a cruise. Is it a 7 day cruise or a 10 day cruise? Or 8 day? 8 days. Hey, Jennifer, good to see you. All right, we got some folks coming in now. Susan Sutherland. Just turn up your volume a little bit, Jennifer. It's definitely working. I'm not in my teaching voice yet, so I'm kind of mild. Cynthia Crane, good to see you. Misty was not feeling well today, and Jimmy hasn't been feeling well for a while, so they might not be around. Jennifer, you could never be a problem. Oh, Susan, that's good. I think it's important enough to do every year. I feel bad when I reuse a sermon, especially when I don't have a whole lot to add to it, but it just is such an important topic that I think it's worth doing. So I hope you enjoy it. This Sunday will be the Witness Sunday. And then, in fact, I just did the bulletin. So then 2 Sundays on forgiveness, and then 1 Sunday on Thanksgiving. And then it will be, that's the end of the Christian year. New Christian year starts, and we pick up with Advent. All right, well, let's get going. This probably, I don't know how long this will take tonight, but I'm not even going to get into actual scripture. I want to talk about the books, what to expect, why we're studying them, that sort of thing. I've gone over it a little bit before, but I was kind of trying to rush when I was doing that just to convince people it was worth coming to. So there are 4 books of the Maccabees, but we are only going to look at the first 2, First Maccabees and Second Maccabees. And the reason is that those are the 2 books that are found in the Septuagint, which is a Greek translation of original Hebrew texts of various books of the Old Testament. Now, the reason that Maccabees, First and Second Maccabees, are in the Apocrypha is, and not the Jewish Bible or the Judeo-Christian Bible or the Old Testament or whatever you want to, however you want to think about it, is because we lost a couple of reasons. One, we lost the Hebrew texts. So we didn't have, we've never had the Hebrew text as far as I know. And the second is it was a later addition to the Septuagint. The Septuagint was a translation into Greek from original Hebrew that was lost for a long time by 70 scholars. Septuagint means 70. It might mean 70 scholars. I don't know. Let's find out. Septuagint. So it seems like, no, it just means 70. But as I said, it was the 70 Jewish scholars that translated the Hebrew scriptures into Greek around, I guess about 3rd century before Christ, BC. And then there's a tradition about this that I don't necessarily believe. The traditional belief about this from the church, whoever is claiming to still be the true church, whether that's the Roman Catholic or the Greek Orthodox or any of the other ones that split off early, is that they all worked independently, and that the 70 of them made the translation, and then when they compared their notes, they all had the exact same word-for-word translation, and that's how they knew it was accurate. That's not important to me for that to be true at all. In fact, I think it's more important to me to think that they probably worked on it in community, because as I've said before, scripture is written by community for community and should be interpreted and translated within a community. So anyway, if we hadn't lost the Hebrew translation, and if it didn't come so late, if it didn't come so late in the Septuagint, this would have just been part of the Jewish canon, and then what would become part of our Jewish canon, Old Testament canon. So it's as close to being canonical as you can get and not be canonical, First and Second Maccabees. There might be some others that are close. Enoch, maybe Sirach, maybe a couple of the other apocryphal books, but this one's close enough to look at. And the reason that I want to look at it, especially right now, is that so this is interesting too. First and Second Maccabees are basically the same story. It's not like First Maccabees is the first part of the history and Second Maccabees is the second part of the history. They're the same story, basically, and not written by the same person. And so because of that, they sort of validate each other in terms of their historical accuracy. And not only that, but we have at this point in history, again, because it was so late in the writings of those books, being late in the Septuagint puts it, just barely before the time of Christ, which is when the Maccabean revolt takes place. But this is a history book. Keeping in mind that history books are always biased, because that's the nature of history. And at least I can say that because these aren't biblical texts. So nobody can say, oh no, this is the inerrant word of God and you're just wrong. I think I can very easily claim that as history books, these are biased. But First Maccabees is going to start out by talking about Alexander. What does it say? The Great. Oh, I'm going to look it up. Hang on. No, I didn't close it. Where's it at? There it is. I did close it, but I think it'll open right to where I was. Do. Okay, it begins by saying, come on. It begins by saying, Alexander began his journey of conquest from Pella, the capital of Macedonia, in the spring of 334 BCE. So not only do we have it dated, which is very unusual for any of the... I might be wrong, but I don't think there's a single canonical Old Testament book that dates itself. So this does, again, just making it much more of a history book. But this Alexander they're talking about, this great man, Alexander, this is Alexander the Great. So not only do First and Second Maccabees kind of work to validate themselves by one being so similar to the other, but now we have other historical documents, especially in this time period, that we know are accurate enough that this happened. I mean, this is not mythology. This is history. This is not so much the story of what the Israelites believed to be true about God and what the Israelites believed to be true about each other, but what the Israelites truly faced as they struggled for independence around the 2nd, 3rd century BCE under the Seleucid Empire. And so this book is basically about the events of the Maccabean Revolt, which we know historically to be 167 to 160 BC. And so the first book, let me get my notes out. Oh, they're just, as long as we're talking about corroboration, First Maccabees and Second Maccabees corroborate each other. There's also Roman and Greek that we call them Hellenistic sources, that aren't necessarily 100% corroborated because the focus of those stories wasn't the Israelites. But the Romans were very good historians, very good record keepers. And they wrote a lot about the political context and struggles between the Jews and the, I wish I knew exactly how to say this word. I'm going to find out. Hang on. Okay, just Seleucids. I was adding I'm going to drop the word in chat so that you can see. There it is. That's the word. So just Seleucids. That's what we're going to call them, Seleucids. So the Roman stories talk about the struggles between the Seleucids and the Jews, and it's consistent what we know about broader Greek history. The Seleucid Empire, the challenges that they presented to the Jewish people, the pressure it faced from the Roman Republic, it all aligns with the narrative that we have in First Maccabees, where this Jewish rebellion occurs. So the story, I'm gonna have to bounce back and forth in my notes a little bit, so be patient with me. The story is about this revolt and about the desire for the people of Israel to rule their own destiny, to be their own people, to have their own nation. And so I mean, in a way, that's been the story all along, right? Except for it wasn't a struggle that they strove for to begin with. They were a nomadic people, and they were fine with being a nomadic people. In fact, when they stopped being nomadic is when they got stuck in Egypt, and went there because of famine, and then got stuck there as slaves. And then, Moses came out and sang, "Let my people go," in a real deep bass voice. And then everything that we know about the Exodus happens. So even after that, they were content to be a nomadic people. In fact, they were afraid to go into the promised land, right? When they got there, they sent spies over and they said, nope, we're not doing that. They've got giants. They got all these people. That's not going to work. And God said, why don't you guys think about it for, I don't know, 40 years or so? See if some of you can just die off so that the rest of you aren't quite so stubborn. So this is a flip, okay? So by this time, Israel says, no, this is our land. This is our promised land that we were promised by God, and we want to be our own independent people with our own government again, and we don't want to be ruled by anyone else. We want our independence. And so this is the same story that Israel's going through today. I mean, it's the same fight. And we're going to talk about this in a way that's not political. We're just going to talk about it in a way that's historical. And then we can look at, see, that's the problem when you talk about history, right? How is history going to write? How is history going to write about the war that's going on right now? Right? I mean, there's an extreme liberal viewpoint of what's going on. They're calling it the genocide of Palestine. And then there's a hardcore conservative. I don't even know if there is, to be honest. There's kind of just the other side of it. which is, the argument. We'll talk about this more later. If you don't know what the problem with Israel and Palestine is, it has to do with the 6 Days War and what was acknowledged and recognized at the end of that war and what wasn't. And we can talk about that next week. Or not next week. Next week is the election, so we're not going to meet next week, but the week after that. So here's what's the other thing that's really cool. Hey, Ben, good to see you. The other thing that's really cool about 1st and 2nd Maccabees, again, is that they are telling the same story, but they're telling it in two different ways. The 1st Maccabees is sort of the historical, nationalist, what's the word that I saw? So 1st Maccabees is regarded as a fairly reliable historical account of the Jewish Maccabean revolt, particularly within Jewish and Greek societies. It's a primary source because it provides a detailed narrative from the perspective of those who were involved in the events. So we don't have a whole lot of primary historical sources, and this is one. So 2nd Maccabees, even though it's going to cover a little bit of a shorter period of time, it's going to cover a lot of the same history, but it's going to be theological in nature. So we're going to get this sort of political nationalistic viewpoint of this revolt, and then we're going to go back and look at the whole thing again with that foundation and look at it from a theological point of view. So historical, political, nationalistic, and then historical, theological, which is going to be, I think, very interesting for us. There's another guy named Josephus, who was a Jewish historian who wrote in the 1st century before Christ. So this would be 100 years after this war, this rebellion, who incorporates a lot of the Maccabean narrative in his works. He wrote two historical histories, I guess. One called Antiquities of the Jews and the other called The Jewish Wars. And that's another source that really sort of backs up and confirms the historical accuracy of 1st Maccabees. So again, let's talk now a little bit. Those are the things that say these are accurate sources that we can trust and look at and learn from in an unbiased way, sort of. And now let's flip that and look at the other side of it and realize, again, where history is concerned, there's no such thing as unbiased, right? In 50, 100 years, there's going to be, there will be history books that talk about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict right now, and they are going to be vastly varied stories depending on who's telling the story, right? So, 1 Maccabees, 1st Maccabees, was written completely from a Jewish perspective. It emphasizes the heroism and the piety of the Maccabean leaders, portraying them as these divinely inspired warriors defending their faith. And it's likely in cases like this that some events are going to be framed to support the author's purpose of showing how right they were and how brave they were, how heroic they were, and what they risked and what they gave up and what they accomplished. And it's going to have a nationalistic perspective. And that's going to affect, it's going to at least color how certain battles and negotiations are depicted, right? The recognition of that is going to help us understand that there's going to be some bias in it. I think one of the most important things to recognize is that we've lost the original Hebrew text. These were not written in Greek, they were written in Hebrew. And we've lost those texts. Now, one thing that happened with the Dead Sea Scrolls is we got some texts that we had lost up until then, right? Like up until the 1950s, these texts had been lost. Many of them are still unreadable. They're being preserved because right now, if they try to restore them, it would ruin them. So they're saving them for a time when our technology can view them better. But even now, they use like X-ray machines and MRI machines and other things like that to dig down and get these sort of cross sections to see the text that are. It's just absolutely incredible. And what we have discovered, which was not really expected to this degree, is that the Hebrew texts found in the Dead Sea Scrolls show that the Septuagint is an extremely accurate translation. Extremely accurate. Which to me, and again, I guess you're going to view this in one of two ways. Either the Septuagint really was written by 70 or 72 different people, each individually, and they came together and lo and behold, they all had the exact same words, or more likely they worked together as a community, because the more you work as a community, the more accurate the work that you present is going to be, the more unbiased it's going to be. That's why when you get something like The Message by Eugene Peterson, that is a paraphrase from one person, not even meant to be a translation, but a paraphrase to be understood in different ways, it's not even, it doesn't even pretend to be accurate. So all that to say that it turns out the Septuagint translation of the Hebrew text that we found in the Dead Sea Scrolls showed us that it's extremely accurate. And so I think based on that, we could guess that the Septuagint translation of 1st and 2nd Maccabees is also going to be extremely accurate, but it's just that. It's just a guess. So without having that Hebrew text to prove it, we have to understand that translation or even transmission could introduce shifts and nuance that maybe should or shouldn't be there. So we don't know for sure. There's some archaeological corroboration that all of this happened as well. Coins, I think this is really cool. Coins minted by rulers that came in later with Hebrew inscriptions sort of validate the dynasty's impact and confirm the political shift described in 1st Maccabees. So again, this is not mythology, this is history. And it is probably as biased and in the same breath as unbiased as any history that you read in middle school, high school, or like I said, what's going to be written in 50 years. How is this election in the United States going to be written about in 50 years? I mean, we don't even know yet, but I guarantee you it will be written in at least 2 very different ways. So that's kind of that. I think I've already talked enough about that. So again, 1st Maccabees is going to be more like a historical chronicle. It's going to provide a straightforward, detailed narrative focusing on political and military events, particularly the leadership of this guy named Judas Maccabeus and his brothers. Again, it's going to be a book that's going to focus on Jewish nationalism and pride, commemorating the Maccabean family's role in securing the religious and political autonomy that they ultimately secured. So its purpose, right? Its raison d'être, its reason for being, its purpose for having been written was to inspire the Jewish people by emphasizing the strength and resilience shown in their resistance and their willingness to resist forced Hellenization. They're losing their culture to be replaced by Greek culture, how they resisted that. 2nd Maccabees, on the other hand, while it will cover a lot of the same events of 1st Maccabees, is going to be written with a theological and more dramatic style. It's going to emphasize the role of God in the Maccabean victories and include counts of martyrdom and miracles and visions to underscore how God never let go of his people, how God was always in control, and how the the rebellion wasn't just a matter of bravery and willingness to act in the face of fear, but as a reassurance of God's ongoing presence and justice, and bring meaning to their suffering. Again, the Alexander that we're going to talk about is Alexander the Great. The historical figure who famously expanded the Macedonian Empire, created one of the largest empires in ancient history. First Maccabees is going to open by acknowledging Alexander the Great's sweeping conquests, including his defeat of King Darius over the Persian Empire, that whole thing. But it's not really in there to talk for or against Alexander the Great. It's to place it within the scope of history in which it exists. And it does a very good job of that. Basically, and we'll get into this a little bit in a couple of weeks, but after Alexander died, his empire was so big it was divided among his generals. And this division led to the formation of I already forgot how to say it, the Seleucid Empire, which is the empire that tried to force Hellenization on the Israelites, and they rebelled against it, which is how the Maccabean Revolution began. As is often the case, I have a lot of notes, but I end up talking about a lot of this stuff as I think about it. And I think that's it. I really think that's the important part. That's what I wanted to lay out tonight. It took a half an hour to do it, but I think that's fine. I don't think we need to go further tonight. I don't want to get into the actual text yet. We have a lot of people who are gone, who will be part of this study going forward, and I want them to be here for the beginning of it. So we're gonna stop there, and this will be up so I can tell those people to go back and watch this session, which I think I will do, and that way they'll be on the same page as we all are moving forward. So anybody have any questions? I'm not going to answer them right now, but if you have questions, I'll make sure I have answers for them next time. So if you can't think of it right now, you feel free to message me, talk to me at church, send me an email, send me a Western Union, whatever, however you want to get a message to me, and I'll try to answer your questions next time. And I might be able to find some answers on the fly as well. Okay. Well, that's it. Listen, we've got a week left before this election, so pray for our nation, pray for peace, pray for reconciliation, pray for acceptance. Hey, Debbie, good to see you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Pray for truth and justice. Truth and justice, not injustice. Truth and justice. And perhaps the thing that is the furthest away from us is the thing that we need the most, and that's unity. So pray for unity. All right. That's it, guys. Thanks for joining tonight. We'll see you in 2 weeks. And